Thank you for joining me for part 2 of What Doesn't Kill Us by Scott Carney. In the last video, if you recall, we were looking at Vandermeulen, who used the Wim Hof method to heal himself. Again, this book is littered with stories like this. Carney takes us through a pantheon of athletes as well who are using the Wim Hof method to boost their performance in a variety of ways. Me, after reading this book, I'm experimenting with doing the breathing and then doing aerobic exercises because one of the athletes in the book, 40-year-old trainer Brian McKenzie, says his hypothesis is that any exercise that makes respiration more efficient will have an immediate effect on cardiovascular performance, and high-intensity interval training routines can take advantage of that sweet spot. But what is that sweet spot? Carney calls it the wedge. It's tapping into the critical fault line that helps crack open the space between the conscious mind and the unconscious physiology. It's kind of like holding back a sneeze. Have you ever done that? Holding back a sneeze is sort of a wedge between the autonomic and somatic nervous systems at the point where an environmental stimulus meets an innate response. Carney says it's the same wedge that a person uses to calm their nerves when standing in the snow, withstanding shivering, holding their breath just a little bit longer, delaying an orgasm, stopping, feeling ticklish. It's the window into the root of human power. Freedivers who descend hundreds of feet below the surface of the ocean on a single breath sometimes call it the master switch. It's the point where the body meets the mind. Over time, it becomes easier to maintain the tension between reflex and mental control. So the Wim Hof training starts with one of the most fundamental reflexes, the urge to breathe. When you take Wim's online classes or go see him, he's now touring. He tasks his students to hold their breath until they can't take it anymore. And then hold it just a little bit longer. This is the quickest and probably safest way to build your own wedge. Sure, you can pass out doing this, but it's rare. It's slightly more common to pass out during breath retentions when your lungs are full because empty lung retentions prompt the gasp reflex earlier. The story's apex comes to a head when Hof and his company, Carney included, decide to trek up Kilimanjaro in record time. This was a little dispute if Carney would come or not. Wim Hof's brother, the businessman, knowing that Carney's a journalist, knew a trip like this would be a little risky to the Wim business. I mean, let's face it, this is high profile. If something goes wrong, the world's going to know. But when Scott asked if he could go, Wim said, "Of course you're going! You have to go!" I mean, that's just how Wim is. He doesn't care. He's the last person to be scared of risks. In Tanzania, a salesman asked Carney, "So you will take 6 or 8 days to go up the mountain?" "No," said Carney, only 2. "You're crazy." That's what everybody would be telling Scott as they made their way to Africa's tallest peak. Move too quickly and you won't make it. There's no need to rush up to the top. The risk of getting altitude sickness is very real. Just chill out, slow down. But, I mean, you hear about people dying up there. When they go up there, the people actually leave the dead bodies up there. You've heard it. But Wim wants to break a record for the fastest group ascent to the top of the mountain. You have to read this to see this from Carney's point of view because he's asking himself, am I following a sane person? What have I got myself into? As much of a genius as Wim is, at the same time, he's pretty manic and can even be self-absorbed like any person can be. But this is a little different. This trip is not just about testing our limits, Wim says. It's about leaving our egos behind and delving deep into our physiology. So to get up to that mountain, they'll be carrying those little O2 monitors, you know, like the kind you get at Walgreens. Or when you go to the doctor, you put your finger in that little thing and a healthy readout reads 97. To get up that mountain, they're gonna have to do a reading every half hour and then start the Wim Hof breathing techniques, breathing faster and deeper if and when their O2 levels drop below 90%. This hyperventilation decreases CO2 and increases overall oxygen in the bloodstream while moving blood pH from acidic to alkaline. During retention with lungs full of air, you sequentially tighten all the muscles from your extremities toward the place where you want to move the blood supply. Carney says it's hard to say exactly what you're physically moving inside the brain when you're targeting a headache. Perhaps it's the smooth muscles and the vasculature, or perhaps you're just thinking at a particular spot. But in his experience, after a few seconds of using this method, the minor headaches vanish and major ones decrease their intensity. It's a harrowing read as they journey up the mountain without their shirts. The temperature hovers around 10 degrees, and the wind chill brings the temperature down to the -30s. They should be getting frostbite. Sometimes Carney has to put a shirt on. It's just so extreme besides the elements. Carney has to battle himself. And this internal battle increases as Wim Hof wants to race up the mountain. The team wants to rest, but Wim Hof will have none of that. "Never mind rest," he says. "We go now and make a new record." Carney can't handle this. He gets pissed. Why not give us an hour, Wim? Why do you have to do this? Don't you dare challenge me, Scott! He roars back. Am I following a madman? Carney asks. To find out what happens, you're gonna have to read the rest of this book. It's thrilling. As a follower of Wim Hof myself, I wasn't sure what to expect. I was actually afraid that the book would tell me what I already knew, but it was filled with surprises at every turn, and besides, being great journalism, it's a great story. This is a must-have for your library. Thank you for joining me today. If you had a fun time, please subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Let me know in the comments section below. I'm curious if you tried Wim Hof and what your experiences are. Thanks guys, my dear friends. I look forward to seeing you next week. It was great, as always.